Hey, what's up guys? My name is GK. Thank you all for your support and I have reached my first milestone of 500 subscribers. I'm going to create a new series of videos on Google Kubernetes engine. As you all know, it is very important for all certifications in Google Cloud. So part 1 of this video is going over Google Kubernetes engine components, in general components of Kubernetes. So by end of this video, you will have sound understanding of Kubernetes concepts. I'm going to name this series as GKE with GK. So this is part 1 of the series, and I hope you're going to like this video, and click on the subscribe button if you like this video, and let me know in the comments what you think about it. So with that, let's go into some of my drawings, and I'm going to explain you through my drawings about the components, and I hope it will be a good start for you all for the Google Kubernetes engine. So let's go to my whiteboard. So what I want to do is I want to start in a different way. So usually you will see tutorials starting from master node and worker node and going through all the different control plane services, but I would start with a container by itself, and then we will walk through the container till the master service, or container through the master. Right, so now you have a small container, and container will actually have your runtime, right? For example, Nginx, or you're running any such application. So group of such containers will create a pod. So pod has its own IP address. Now when you have multiple pods, right, so this is pod 1 and you have another pod, you have so basically this pod, this whole thing is called node. Let's say in Google Kubernetes engine, a node is nothing but a compute engine instance, and in that node you have pods, and inside pods you have your containers where your actual services run. So inside node there is another service called kubelet. Think of it as an agent for the master to communicate to the node. It is like a client server communication. Now there is another service which is called Proxy. So this is responsible for the networking for this node, right? As I've said before, node has one IP address and pod also has its own IP address. So Proxy is the one that manages all the networking components inside the node, and you're going to have many such nodes. So this might be node 1, right, and you will have many such nodes like node 2, many such nodes where you're going to cluster them. Kubernetes is going to decide like which node to use and where to actually deploy the container. Now you can also call this as the workers. So this is what you often hear in the terms of, when you try to understand Kubernetes in maybe AWS or somewhere, you'll also call these as worker nodes. The main machines where your actual stuff work, where the brain of the whole Kubernetes is called master. So master has all the key important control plane services. Let's start with API service or API server. This is very important because this is the main communication channel for your clients to communicate. For example, if you are using kubectl inside your Google Cloud, or if you are using any other service, an API, to communicate to the pods or to your containers, or even controlling anything, all the traffic and everything happens from this RESTful API server. It exposes the endpoints to operate inside this cluster. So this whole this whole thing can also be called as a cluster in GKE terms. So another service is called etcd. So this is a database to store all the data about Kubernetes objects. Like think of it as a Kubernetes its own database. It's a key value pair database like Redis maybe, but basically it stores all the information and objects related to the current state, access information or any other config information that is maintained in etcd. So the other component is scheduler. So scheduler is responsible to decide which payload needs to run in which machine. So I'll go through a scenario of how scheduler will act by taking a simple example, right? But so this is the responsibility of a scheduler. So scheduler will decide which container or where to deploy the container in any of these node 1 or node 2, and it will decide based on that. So there is another service called control manager. So this controls the state of the cluster and takes action to bring it to the expected state. So this makes sure the state that you want the clusters to be in, and it will try to bring into that state, and it constantly monitors. So that's control manager. Now another service which is called as cloud control manager. So this is responsible for connecting to other cloud services inside GKE. So as you know, Kubernetes is not only for Google, but Kubernetes is also used by AWS and a lot of other cloud service providers. So this makes sure that your Kubernetes can connect to other components of the cloud. So I hope so far you are able to understand what is master, what are worker nodes in GKE. So one advantage is that we do not have to touch the master at all. So it's completely managed by Google. Now all we care about is what we want to deploy, which application do we want to deploy, and how to scale, and what is the configuration that we want to choose. For example, we can have multiple masters across the zones. You can have one master in one zone, another master in another zone, so that way you can have a highly available control plane or master configuration. Because as you know, if the master is down or if the control plane is down, like I've said, it's the brain of the Kubernetes, application can still work, but the orchestration, everything happens here. So in Google provides you an option to scale your masters across the region. You can maintain multiple masters. Even if one master is down, it can be available in another zone or region. Now the same applies for nodes too. So nodes are completely auto scalable through GCE. They use auto scaling configurations, so they can scale across the zones, and so that's highly available as well. So that's one of the advantage of GKE, because you don't have to manage anything, and you just have to make sure that you're deploying your application and choosing the right configuration based on your workloads. Since we have the components listed out here, let's take a simple scenario, right? So now if you want to create a pod, so what will happen? So when you try to invoke creation of the pod from kubectl, which is a kube controller, right, you would try to invoke everything through API server. Like I've said, API server is the main component where you're going to talk to multiple services, right? So the request will go to the API server. So first the request will go to API server, and API server will try to persist that information, or it will store that information in its database, right? And then it will send a request to the scheduler to schedule the job, and scheduler will decide where to run the pod. Now the scheduler will, through the API server, will invoke kubelet for that node. As API server invokes kubelet, kubelet talks to the Docker daemon using API over the Docker socket to create the container. Now kubelet updates the status of the pod to the API server, and API server persists the new state in etcd. So these are the steps that happen between the master and the worker. So hope this video is very helpful for you all to understand the key components of the Kubernetes, and the components still remain same even in the case of Google Kubernetes engine. So in the next video, I am going to create the cluster in GKE using the Google console, and then we are going to see how we can use GKE to deploy our applications in future videos. With that, thank you all for watching this video, and let me know in the comment section if you have any questions or anything related to this video. And I'm sure, like, if you are new to the containers, I'm definitely going to walk through the creation of container in Google Cloud, in VM, or I'll show you how easily we can create a container. And by the way, we can also use GCR, which is Google Cloud Registry, for storing your Docker images. So we're going to go through all this stuff, and my next few videos are completely concentrated on GKE. So with that, thank you all.